Hello and welcome to GameSack. We're talking about gaming mascots
of years gone by. Yeah. There's been a lot of them. There's tons of mascots out there that companies tried to make and they just didn't fly. And
yeah,
I don't know. I always thought Sonic was one of those, but they just kept pushing them into everybody's face. So.
Yes, indeed, they did. Anyway, I've got the first mascot game that we're going to take a look at, and let's find out what happened to this guy. Socket appeared on the Genesis in 1993 from Vic Tokai. At first it looks and plays pretty much like a straightforward Sonic clone, but there's definitely a bit more to it than that. Socket is a duck, I think, who can't fly or something? I don't know. In Japan, this game is called Time Dominator. Maybe they changed the name to Socket to make it sound more like Sonic. Again, I don't know. Socket is supposedly traveling through time throughout the game, but to be honest, I can't really tell. Everything here looks exactly like 1993 to me. Anyway, Socket himself runs on electricity. He has absolutely no carbon emissions like other mascots. He powers up at the beginning of the stage and collects little lightning bolts throughout, similar to Sonic's rings. They don't work the same way though. Instead, Socket is constantly running out of energy because his batteries just can't hold a charge, I guess. These little bolts give him more energy, so you have a reason to try to collect as many as you can. Yeah, it kind of works like Adventure Island and Wonder Boy, but with an electric flightless duck instead, so it's better. You definitely want to keep your energy high because when it gets low, it gets really, really annoying. You don't jump on enemies like you do in Sonic, but instead you have an electric kick. There really aren't very many enemies in any given stage, so you don't have to worry about it too much. The stages are divided up into 3 different types of zones. The first is always a high-speed area. As you guessed, the stage layout here is designed to emphasize speed. Since the very first stage in this game is a high-speed area, most people probably just started to play that and just thought of it as a Sonic clone and turned it off and forgot about it forever. The second stage is the athletic area, which requires a bit more dexterity in moving Socket around, and there's a bit more platforming to do. The third stage is the Labyrinth area. Damn these areas! They are total mazes, and I hate these stages mainly because it's tough to find out where you need to go and everything looks almost exactly the same. At the end of these stages is the boss fight. You're always fighting the same boss, kind of similar to how Sonic's always fighting Robotnik or Eggman or whatever he's called these days. And this guy is usually pretty easy to defeat. Scattered throughout each stage behind semi-transparent doors are the bonus stages. These can range from a pretty fun time like jumping back and forth between planes to downright annoying stages like this one where you need to make it to the top. The graphics in Socket are fairly good. The scrolling isn't as smooth as Sonic as it does hiccup sometimes when you're moving really fast. There isn't a lot of music in the game, but what is here is excellent. Very catchy melodies that will take a long time to wear on you. That's a good thing too, as the tracks here are also very short. So is Socket a Sonic clone? Yeah, it definitely is, but it's unique enough to stand on its own and be judged by its own merits. I like the game, but I'd like it a lot more if the Labyrinth areas were a lot less labyrinthy.
Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg, released in September 2003 for the GameCube, is a game produced by Yuji Naka. That's right, folks, the same Yuji Naka that created Sonic the Hedgehog. It even says so right here on the box. Sega had to put this disclaimer there or nobody would have bought it based on the cover alone. Anyways, this is a game about a boy named Billy who is guilted into helping these chickens. A gang of bad crows has taken over Morningland, made everything dark and has taken all the leaders and put them into eggs. Billy, being the only one with hands, needs to rescue these leaders from the bad crows and bring light back to Morningland. He's given a legendary chicken suit so he can handle the eggs that will give him the power to defeat the evil Dark Raven. As you can see, the way you play this game is by grabbing an egg and pushing it to kill bad guys. Once a bad guy is defeated, he leaves behind some fruit which helps you grow your egg. Once your egg is big enough, you can yell at it and that'll hatch the egg. There are many types of eggs in this game. Each one can contain a number of different things like helper animals, extra lives, and so on. The helper animals are great and are needed to access certain areas and platforms. The first time I played this game back when it was released, I was a little disappointed. The game didn't really catch my attention, and after a short period of time I got bored and just turned it off. Now that I'm playing it for this review, I'm enjoying it much more than I did then. The game has 7 worlds with quests on each one that you gotta complete to earn an Emblem of Courage. Doing this advances the game and opens new areas. Controlling Billy and his eggs is actually easy and pretty fun. You can use your egg to bounce on enemies or into rings which help you get to higher platforms or new areas of a map. There's plenty of fan service in this game with eggs that contain Sonic and Samba and other Sega characters. The music is pretty enjoyable while playing the game and it's a natural fit for the atmosphere. Billy Hatcher never went on to be in his own game again, but he is in games like Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing which feature levels based on his game. These are fun, but just not the same. I like this game and I don't see why Sega has left him behind like a rotten Easter egg. They sure do like leaving things behind.
Croc was available for the PlayStation and the Saturn among other systems. This here is the PlayStation version. It was made by Argonaut, the makers of Star Fox. Now as you would imagine, Croc is short for crocodile, which is what you're supposed to be. But to me it looks like I'm controlling a seriously inept Yoshi in a dimension where he just doesn't belong. And that's how the story goes. This was supposed to be a Yoshi game on the upcoming Nintendo 64, but Nintendo told Argonaut where to stuff it, so we get Croc instead. Anyway, it's a 3D platformer with a heavy emphasis on platformer. You'll be jumping from floating thing to floating thing in pretty much every single stage. You'll collect jewels which work kind of like the rings in Sonic, allowing you to take a hit as long as you have some. There's also special colored jewels which can open special doors if you have them all, which lead to extra stages. You also rescue these furry little creatures called gobos from time to time. You see, these furry creatures raised Croc and taught him how to walk and jump and all that sort of stuff. Then Shrek comes in and has his minions kidnap all of these little furballs and you're off to save them all. There are 5 worlds with a bunch of stages each. Each stage is divided up into several smaller areas separated by doors. Every third stage or so ends in a boss fight. Shrek is lazy and he'll usually make cute innocent things fight you. He is the epitome of pure evil, I tell ya. He must be stopped. These bosses are usually pretty easy as well, and you need to wait for them to take a swing and miss, and then they're pretty much vulnerable. The controls are okay, but they're far from the best. The camera's really bad, and it doesn't help that it's often hard to judge the depth of the various platforms you need to jump onto. This is why I don't really like many early 3D platformers. They've just improved so much since then, and not just graphically. Speaking of graphics, they're fairly good for the time. Lots of bright colors, just like you'd expect in a cute mascot game. As much as I hate to say it, the Saturn version of the game is much, much worse. Everything is a lot darker and it moves more slowly and at a lower frame rate. This all makes it much harder to control even if you use an analog pad. It's extremely frustrating. The graphics did have less warping than the PlayStation version, and the less warping the better. Croc 2 came out for the PlayStation and it also had a few other ports elsewhere. This one adds kind of a hub world as well as actual missions to accomplish in the stages themselves. The jewels no longer work like the rings in Sonic. Instead, you're allowed 3 hits unless you can find more hearts. Otherwise, it's pretty similar, just with updated graphics and sound. The control is a bit better as well. Croc never really caught on with the masses and he was soon forgotten, rightfully so. He did have a few mobile games, but as you can imagine, that's not much of a comeback. But to be quite honest, I think with Nintendo's touch, this could have been a great 3D Yoshi game.
Chibirobo for the GameCube sets you in the role of playing a 10cm tall robot. So the dad of the Sanderson family purchased you and brought you home for the family to enjoy. Mom said that the robot was too expensive and to pay for it she makes her husband sleep on the couch. What a nice lady. How lucky you are to be brought into a nice dysfunctional family. Anyways, the whole premise of this game is to earn happy points and to help the Sandersons with their life problems. To earn happy points, you must pick up the family's garbage that they leave laying around the house, and you also need to scrub the floors with a toothbrush. Yep, you guessed it, this game is basically a housekeeping simulator with a few other play mechanics slapped on to try and cover up the fact that you're just a slave. I played this game for just over 3 very boring hours, and it felt like I played for a month straight. There's nothing in this game that even gets remotely exciting, and you never get a sense of accomplishment, unless you feel gratified by picking up other people's virtual garbage. Chibi controls well. His environments are big enough that it almost feels like a chore just to traverse them. He moves fairly slow with this plug trailing him, and he will actually move a little bit faster if you decide to hold the plug. Oh, and the plug is to charge your battery every couple of minutes. Everything you do in this game drains your battery, so you must stop at a wall outlet and charge up. You can increase the size of your battery by getting happy points or by buying chips that will extend the battery life. There was a sequel release to the DS which I didn't buy, and also a 3DS release which I also didn't buy. I know there are people out there that like this game, but I'm not one of them. To me, it's easy to see why this mascot hasn't made it big. This game is just incredibly boring, and if you haven't played it, just pass it up if you ever see it, even for cheap. And no, mine's not for sale, so don't ask.
Sounds like... Oh, there's more cops. Oh, there's more cops.
In Buck Bumble for the Nintendo 64, you play as a cyborg bee. This one was also developed by Argonaut, and it's no wonder Nintendo told them to get lost because this game really isn't all that special. The game can best be described as Star Fox without rails, or science fiction, or quality. Basically, radioactive waste has mutated the insects and the evil ones are trying to take over the entire garden. They must be stopped immediately, can't let that happen. Buck bumbles around shooting other insects which explode, as well as accomplishing various tasks laid out in each stage. These can range from simply destroying all of the insects besides yourself, blowing up radar scattered throughout the stage, or things like that. To do this, Buck can fly anywhere he pleases, except where he can't. The control takes some getting used to, but once you do, it's fairly workable. Buck still likes to bump into just about everything though. His default gun is super slow and weak, almost to the point of being unusable, so you'll want to collect weapon power-ups as soon as you possibly can. Most of these are nothing really special, but my favorite is the rocket-propelled grenade which you control after it's fired. You just guide it to its destination and BAM! This weapon is so much fun to use, but it does leave Buck unprotected while you're controlling it. Unfortunately, most of the different stages look very similar with not much added except different enemies. And there's tons of N64 fog. As a result, the graphics are extremely ugly and blurry. But what else would you expect? I mean, not every game can look as nice as Super Mario 64, I guess. The music is even worse as it's very dull and repetitive. Gotta give props to Buck's theme song in the title screen though.
Bump to the bump to the bump to the bass, bump to the bump to the bump, bump to the boot to the boot to the boot boot, bump to the bass to the bass bass.
Can you say best video game music ever? Nah, neither can I. Buck Bumble is a decent game to get into if you have absolutely nothing else to play and don't mind vomit-colored graphics. Sadly, Buck never went on to star in any other games.
Well, Joe, it's easy to see why some of these mascot games didn't take off. I mean, some of these characters are just ridiculous.
Oh yeah, especially the Chibirobo.
Oh, God.
Actually, I was surprised you didn't mention that. He has something in common with Socket that he constantly needs to be recharged.
Oh,
So,
well, you
yeah.
know, I was just so enthralled in Chibirobo's badness that I didn't even
Yeah.
think about it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, you've got the next one, and it's surprisingly a Sega game, so
Big surprise.
yeah, let's see what Dave has to say about that.
Here's Vector Man for the Genesis, and rumor has it that this game was Sega's answer to the pre-rendered sprites in Donkey Kong Country. This could be true, as it came out almost a full year after the way better Donkey Kong. Vector Man plays as a run-and-gun game with some platforming elements. At first glance, the protagonist looks like he was taken straight from the Balls 3D video game since he's made out of lots of little balls. I'm sorry, Sega, but Vector Man is just not a good-looking character. The game plays well enough. The levels are usually pretty big with lots of areas to search through. Your basic weapon is okay, but you can get new weapon types by breaking TVs. All these other weapons have limited ammo, and you'll be notified by a very annoying alarm when your weapon is about to run out of ammunition. You can also collect icons that will morph Vector Man into different shapes that'll help you. Like this bomb that can destroy walls, or this fish that lets you swim faster. These are fine and all, but for example, when you're a fish, you can't shoot, so it seems kind of pointless to morph into a fish unless you're just gonna swim past everything. For the most part, the game is straightforward without anything that really makes it feel special. Though I do kind of like the look of this bonus stage where you have a train that's about 4 miles off the ground, and another huge robot from Balls 3D is acting like a monkey, and you have to shoot his hands. The music in this game is okay. It sounds like standard Western developed Genesis fare to me, but it has some nice stereo separation here and there, and I like that. Vector Man 2 came out a year later, and it's more of the same with a few new features. Vector Man talks to himself this time around. He really doesn't say anything interesting, but at least it's not annoying. The two Vector Man games that were released aren't by any means bad games, but they aren't necessarily great games either. I guess Sega feels the same way that I do, because we haven't seen anything new with Vector Man and he's all but forgotten.
Punky Skunk was released by Jalico for the PlayStation in 1998. It was actually released in 1996 in Japan, so that kind of explains the early generation feel this game kinda has. You star as Punky, who is a skunk with lots of tude. Every time the game loads, he's telling you to chill out. That's just how cool he is. His main form of attack is his stank. Everything that touches it dies because Punky's stank is nasty. Punky also has friends who help him create gadgets. On the first island, he gets a new gadget in each stage. These range from parachutes to help him glide in the wind, or roller skates, or a pogo stick to jump higher. Of course, they're placed in the middle of the stage and you have to go get them because your friends know that you're cool enough to find them. After you complete the first island, your inventor friend is kidnapped, but conveniently, his inventions are still placed throughout all the levels. Once you have an item, you can turn it on and off with the circle button, but you can't carry any more than one type of item at a time. So suffice it to say, the game's not exactly deep. But is it fun? Yeah, I enjoy it, at least a little bit. Sometimes in the game you gotta get crafty, like digging under a rock so it falls and becomes a platform so you can jump on. There are often bonus stages which have you doing different things, like trying to light 4 light bulbs with exercise bikes, or trying to raise flags faster than this creepy mechanical guy. There's lots of variety in these, and they do help add to the game. The boss fights are basically bonus stages as well. Like this one, it plays like whack-a-mole. The graphics are full of color and lots of scrolling layers, but what we get here really isn't a huge leap above what the Super Nintendo could do. There's no amazing special effects or anything like that anywhere. In fact, I bet a high-memory Super Nintendo game with an FX2 chip could look exactly like this. Well, except with fewer colors and running a bit more slowly, so I guess not exactly. The music is okay. It's upbeat and almost catchy, but it's not anything you'll remember after you turn the game off. The sound effects are pretty bad. Just listen to the sound Punky makes every single time he jumps.
Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
That gets annoying really fast. So why wasn't the entire world enamored with Punky Skunk? Well, he's a skunk. Just look at him. What the hell is he doing? What a repulsive little twat. Oh, and the game isn't full of polygons, so everyone pretty much just ignored it. Overall, it's a fairly pleasant game, and it could be a lot worse.
I've got it!
Keith Courage in Alpha Zones is an action platformer for the TurboGrafx 16. This was a packing game for the system for a couple of years until it was replaced by Bonk. So there are 7 worlds in this game, each consisting of an overworld and an underworld. In the overworld portion, you play as the human Keith. Here, you mainly kill small enemies for money and visit houses that will heal you, sell you weapons and bombs, or give you advice. Once you get to the end of the overworld, a pretty rainbow comes down and takes you to the underworld, where you are now in the Nova suit. This part of the world isn't as straightforward, and you'll be going down and back up, fighting your way through lots of enemies until you get to the boss. The enemies in this game regenerate once you scroll the screen forward and go back. In the overworld, this is great as you can do this to rack up lots of money. In the underworld, it can be a pain in the ass. When you're jumping on platforms and getting knocked down by an enemy, they'll often regenerate, meaning you'll probably get knocked down again. It can be a little frustrating, but it's manageable. The bosses in this game aren't horribly difficult, and if you have bombs, that'll really help you make quick work of them. Keith controls well, and platforming is easy. Fighting enemies is fun for the most part until you get trapped by them regenerating all over the place, but you can easily power through those parts with little damage. As you can see, the game is very colorful and used the vast majority of the Turbo's color capability. The music in this game is good enough, and I do think that the sound effects in this game are really cool. I'm not sure why Hudson Soft and NEC made only one game. Maybe it had to do with licensing problems with the anime show the Japanese version is based on, but it's a shame as this is kind of a fun game. Keith himself isn't a licensed property, so he could have been in more games. I like the idea of fighting both as a human and in the Nova suit and would have liked to have seen at least one sequel. But it was never meant to be, and I guess we should just be happy with what we've got.
Scud the Disposable Assassin on the Saturn is based on a comic book of the same name. I've never read the comic, but basically Scud is a robot that you can buy at a vending machine when you want to have someone killed. How's that for convenience? Once the target's destroyed, the robot is supposed to self-destruct, but Scud didn't.
Can you keep a monster alive so I don't self-destruct?
We can do anything.
Now everyone is trying to kill him, and Scud is just trying to stay alive and, I guess, kill everything he sees while he's at it. This is a run and gun, and for the most part it's pretty cool once you get past the initial difficulty curve. I definitely recommend switching the control layout around. You run along the stage blowing stuff up, and it'll often switch into a first-person perspective for some of the boss fights or various parts of certain levels. This adds some variety, which helps keep it a bit fresh. When Scud uses a close-range attack, the screen zooms in while he does it. Scud himself is likable enough for a murderous robot. His life meter works just the opposite as you'd expect. The more it fills with red, the closer he is to death. Certain icons can be collected to lower this and also power up your weapon temporarily. If you beat the game with Scud, you can play as his buddy Drywall. He plays pretty much the same, only more silly. For example, one of his power-ups is shooting fish from his gun. Some of the stages can seem pretty long and repetitive, and that was one part I didn't really care for. One thing that's cool is that this game can also be played with your Sega Stunner light gun. Everyone loves light gun games, right? Well, this one is pretty tough, and I can't even make it to the end of the first stage. I do, however, like how the screen doesn't flash when you pull the trigger unless you're not pointing at the screen, which you only really need to do when you reload, or you're a horrible shot like me. The graphics are fairly dark, and they mostly have that pre-rendered look to them, which kinda makes them less good, you know? But aside from that, they're good enough to get the job done. The music is really good for the most part, with high quality tunes by a few different random bands which I've never heard of. It's a tough but decent game, and I'm surprised that Scud never started in any other games after this.
Captain Commando was kind of a mascot for Capcom back in the early days of the NES and SNES. He appeared on the back of many games and instruction manuals. I guess Capcom liked him so much that he got his own arcade game in 1991. That game then made its way to the Super Nintendo in 1995. As with most arcade ports of the time, things were left out due to the limitations of home consoles. A few noticeable changes were that the arcade had mech-type vehicles you could ride. Also, the arcade seems to have more weapons and of course more enemies on screen than the home port. As you can see, this is a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It's nothing special compared to other games of this genre, and it's just an average game really. There are 4 playable characters to choose from, and they all feel very similar when fighting your way through a level. The control is pretty good, but there really isn't a lot of variety in your attacks. With only a jump button, a special button, and one attack button, you can't really expect too much. And of course, the special button drains a portion of your life bar, so you won't be using that unless you're in dire need. The music is hit and miss, but mostly miss, and only a few tracks were kind of enjoyable. Graphics look pretty good, and there is a nice diversity in the locations you fight in. I think this was a good direction for Capcom to go with Captain Commando. I wouldn't mind seeing more games of this type, but just with better execution. Captain Commando did make an appearance on the PS1 in Japan, and as you know, he's a playable character in some of Capcom's crossover fighting games, such as Marvel vs. Capcom 2, among others.
And there you go. Those are some of the forgotten mascots of time past. And of course, we didn't include every single mascot game ever made. I know we forgot the one that you are thinking about.
Yeah,
Sorry.
right. Just go ahead and tell Joe right away that he forgot a certain game and see what he says to you. So
I'll be very happy. Yeah. I know I forgot it. Just, whatever.
I did on purpose just to spite you.
Yeah, to spite you.
Just kidding.
Anyway.
Just kidding. So, well, what did you think of those games? Tell us. That's what we're more interested in, is what you thought of the games that we talked about today instead of the games that we didn't talk about today.
Yeah, let us know. And in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. Dave, have you seen the newest mascot they're coming out with? His name is Phonics. Isn't he cool? He's all about the sound, and he likes movies and certified auditoriums. He is rad.
I think I like this guy. He's got tude, he's down, he's hip.
Yeah. He is neat.
I'd totally buy a game with this guy.
Oh yeah. Well, guess what, Dave?
Huh.
His name's not Phonics. Guess who's back?
Ah, George! I hate this guy! Get out of here! You know I have nightmares.